I'm your host, Tom Wilmer, reporting from Templeton, California at Victor Hugo Winery. And we're here with Vic Roberts, the owner. Hi, Vic.
Hi, Tom.
So you grow 80 acres of grapes?
We do.
And you process them yourself?
Yes, everything is processed here on site. The wine is all 100% estate, sustainably farmed, and has been now for a number of years. Actually, the last time we purchased grapes, I think it was 2005.
Why did you do that? You needed something?
That's exactly correct. We needed, I think, some additional Cabernet, and we didn't have enough Cabernet on site at the time. We have subsequently either planted or grafted to change our varietal mix to match what we need for the winery.
You go way back here. I mean, you go back to the 90s as a winemaker, right?
Well, actually, even a little longer than that, Tom. It's kind of scary. The first vintage for Victor Hugo was 1997. We actually did some off-site processing while we renovated the 100-and-some-odd-year-old redwood barn into a winery. First crush here was 1999.
But before, out in Creston, I think you...
15 years out there. I first came to the Paso Robles area in 1982 for a winemaking job. UC Davis Enology grad, 79. So first crush was in 79. But you could do the math. 26 will be Harvest 48 for me in all the various forms. But basically came to... Paso in 82, the operation needed a winemaker, general manager, and with that paper-thin resume, I convinced him I was perfect. My wife Leslie and I bought our property here in Templeton in 1984, started planting vines in 1985. Once the vineyard started producing, we sold all of the fruit until 97 when we started Victor Hugo.
So, evolution. What varietals did you start with, and how did what you chose to grow evolve?
Originally, we planted what would sell because we were a vineyard only, and we planted a fair amount of Chardonnay, which some people say, well, you can't really grow Chardonnay in Paso Robles, but I think you can, particularly in the cooler areas like Templeton Gap, where we are. Chardonnay does quite well. I mean, like any variety you want to plant, you have to manage the variety properly. Subsequent plantings were Zinfandel, which is, of course, Paso is famous for Zinfandel, has been for quite a while. Then when we first had the glimmer that we might be starting a winery, we started planting additional red varieties that we could use for the brand. We planted Petite Syrah, Syrah, and 5 Bordeaux Reds on site. The other addition, white-wise, we planted Viognier in about 2000, and then the last planting, or the last new varietal, was Tannat.
So you had some recent evolutions too.
Yes, well, we've added Tannat. We've done some replanting of some blocks with some superior clones that weren't available when we first planted the vineyard, particularly Cab Franc. We have a new clone that we really like. You'll see it in our estate Cab Franc standalone, also in our Bordeaux blend we call Opulent. It's the Cab Franc driver in that blend. The other varieties, we've planted some new clones on Cabernet also that weren't available when we first planted the vineyards. You know, some fine tunings along the way.
You really rely on your wine club for your major sale, right?
Absolutely. The post-COVID wine market continues to be one where consolidation of distribution channels continues. It's more difficult to pursue wholesale business, particularly if you're a smaller producer like ourselves. So we've always done a combination of processing fruit, selling extra wine. As a business model, it's always been a combination. The highest profit margin for any winery is sell direct retail to a consumer. The second highest margin is sell to your wine club members, because almost every winery offers their club members a discount, which is great. You know, we don't regret it at all. The third highest is to sell private label. Someone wants, to buy X amount of cases of a product. Behind that, bulk wine. Grape sales are actually, for most wineries, are the lowest profit margin, but of course they're the least work.
Right.
So it all depends on how you look at the picture. We've always done a combination of all of that.
You have a high labor cost. You hand harvest, right?
Hand harvest everything that we process here.
You ever thought about going to mechanized?
Well, and we have used some mechanized harvesting on fruit that we're selling to others. It certainly is much more cost effective, But the quality, I still believe, is better for hand picking, particularly for small lot production that we're trying to do.
What is happening in the wine growing and wine production world? It's head spinning how things are changing.
We're in I guess you could call it a market correction. The wine business tends to do the boom and bust cycle every 8 to 10 years because of the lag time between planting and production, which is normally a minimum of 4 years. We can have a shortage, but by the time a shortage is recognized, you may have twice as many people planting as necessary to cure the shortage. So then you go from shortage to sufficient to oversupply and vine removal. And basically, just like it's happening in Australia and France and Italy, large segments of wine grape vineyards are being removed because we're probably 18 months into this downturn. And I would suspect that there are a large number of vineyards that won't be farmed this year, and whether they're removed immediately or removed later, that's going to be up to the property owner, cash flow, what else they can do with the property, what their long-term goals are. Do they have flexibility to grow another crop? A lot of areas that wine grapes are grown, particularly premium wine grapes along the coast, there aren't a lot of other crops that are economically viable in the same acreage. So some of the interior vineyards can switch from wine grapes to almonds to pistachios, apricots, so there's a lot of more variety in the San Joaquin Valley. But along the coastal strip, a lot of people are, looking for answers right now.
In the valley, I know that Gallo shut down some major operations.
They're the largest vineyard owner in Sonoma County, and they are a large vineyard owner in Paso Robles area, and they had a production plant here in San Miguel, just north of Paso Robles proper, still within the Paso Robles AVA. They closed it because they were, I think, going to move all of their fruit that they'd been harvesting locally and processing there to another one of their larger facilities. Apparently it shut an operation also in, I believe it's in Napa County. We will come through this. This one's downturn is being exacerbated by the fact that for the first time in forever, wine consumption is no longer growing. Right. It actually has dropped off.
Some industry articles I read said that the younger people, millennials and whatever below, are shifting. They're kind of moving away from their love affair with wine.
Yeah, I don't understand it, the whole fizzy, sweet designer cocktail drinks, but then I've been drinking wine for a long time. So, but that is a segment of the market that's growing. Everybody in the business faces the same, we're competing for customers.
Well, in a parallel world, microbreweries have been having a tough time. There have been a lot closing.
Same thing. They exploded in the last, 10, 12 years. And we've been seeing probably 3-4 years ago starting to have more microbrews than the market would support. They're closing up. So, it's a little different curve, unlike a vineyard and winery operation that may be, if they are intent on using only their own fruit for red wines, from first planting to first release might be 6 or 7 years on reds. A microbrewery can set up stainless equipment, cooling, can get barley year-round, et cetera, et cetera. So, or whatever raw hops, whatever your choice of.
And they can push out a finished product in weeks.
And of course, it's year-round. But because it's a much lower threshold to enter the market, you can get a lot of competitors very quickly.
So you need to be a fortune teller to a degree. I mean, your reds might barrel age for 18, 20 months.
True. Yeah, no, we normally are somewhere between 18 and 20 months. Our bigger wines, some of the reserve styles are, 24, 26 months, but still you're looking at that time frame, and then you need to bottle them, because if it's not like if 2 years in barrels is good, 4 years is better. Not true, because you have to have the balance between the fruit, the flavors, the barrel oak, the oak component you're picking up from barrels, and the complexity. And eventually, if you leave the wine in barrels indefinitely, the fruit fades. And so you want to get, when everything is in focus and in balance, put it in the bottle. And then you have a much longer...
But there's that advantage of bottle aging for a while.
Absolutely. And then, but just like any inventory storage, it takes space. And so
And you're not getting a return on investment.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of motivation for some people, smaller people, to push the product out sooner than later.
there is, obviously, for multiple reasons, space and cash flow. But, once the red wine, particular bigger red wines that we typically grow in Paso Robles, once they're in the bottle, I mean, you have 5 to 10 years when they're going to be at their best for marketing and sales, but you may not be able to afford to hold them 5 to 10 years before you sell them.
But once in the bottle.
Once in the bottle. I'm optimistic. I've been, let's see, I calculated this out. I think this next vintage is going to be harvest 47 for me. Could be 48. I'll have to check on that. But anyway, the point is, I've been doing it a while. We've been doing it for ourselves since 97. Before that, I was working for other people. But these are not unusual cycles. This is just a normal cycle we're going through, maybe a little rougher because of the shift in consumer preferences. But, the wine industry, I think, will come out of it perhaps a little different, looking a little different. But, it's the time to make sure you're being economically prudent in all your decisions. Nobody's going to have a lot of extra cash just laying around that they can afford to waste. So, it's, but I think all in all, we might be through this correction in another 12 to 15 months.
Starts all over again.
And then it starts all over again.
Vic Roberts, thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thanks, Tom. It was good seeing you again.
I'm your host, Tom Wilmer, reporting from Victor Hugo Winery. Tom Wilmer, reporting from Templeton, California.